Today, we'll be going over every deck in Union Arena for Nikke, Goddess of Victory. So we'll be starting off with our first deck, a yellow deck, and of course we will be going over the important cards for the deck. So the first card is our 5 cost 1 AP Modernia that says Raid. When played, add any number of memory cards from your sideline to your hand. When attacking, choose up to one character with 1000 or less BP on your opponent's front line and sideline it. You may place any number of event cards from your hand into your sideline. If you do, for each event card placed into your sideline with this ability, add 1000 to the BP range of the character you may choose with this ability. The first effect allows you to bring back memory cards from your sideline to your hand, and in doing so it allows you to fuel your when attacking ability. And note that this is a when attacking ability, not a when played ability, so you can use it on every turn that you can attack. And note that you can discard any number of event cards, not necessarily memory cards, to bump up the BP range of the card you want to sideline. And what is a memory card? It is an event card that costs 3, 1 AP, that says you can only use one memory card per turn. Draw 2 cards, then place 1 card from your hand into your sideline. If you place an event card into your sideline with this ability, choose up to one of your AP cards and switch it to active. So this card is pretty much used to only fuel your Modernia, in that it basically just allows you to cycle, and if you discard an event card, it doesn't cost you an AP. And of course we have cards in our deck that allow us to search the memory, such as our 3 cost 1 AP Marion, and also our 2 cost 1 action point Marion also. Our next raid card is the 4 cost 1 AP Rapi that says if you have 3 or more other counters affinity cards on your field, this character gains impact 1. When played, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, reveal up to 1 yellow event card among them and add it to your hand. Place the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. If you added a card to your hand, place 1 card from your hand into your sideline. So note that this is a great card to allow you to search for those memory cards, or a special as needed. When attacking, choose up to 1 other counter affinity card on your field. It gains 1000 BP until the end of the turn. So pretty useful if you want to bump up a 3000 BP character to that 4000 BP threshold. And now our next raid card is the 4 cost 1 AP Anis that has inherently nullify impact and also double block. This card also says when played, draw 2 cards, then place 2 cards from your hand into your sideline. If you have used an event card this turn, 3 instead. So if you have not played an event card, this effectively gives you a net 0 cards in hand, but it allows you to fuel your sideline with memory cards to be able to bring them back with Modernia. But if you have used an event card this turn, you effectively net 1 card. And now we'll be looking at the color triggers that we are playing in the deck. So preferably we're playing the 4 cost 1 AP Neon that says if you have used an event card this turn, this character gains damage 2, and when attacking, you may draw a card. If you do, place 1 card from your hand into your sideline until the end of the turn. And note that this card has 4000 BP. So this card is very good since we are a deck that really sustains itself with event cards. So most turns this card will have damage too, and it's when attacking ability. And we are playing this card in place of the 4 cost Flash Point Marion. That is also a color trigger with 4000 BP that inherently has nullify impact, but this is a more passive card since it comes in with a when sideline ability that allows you to search for memory cards or counter affinity cards with 3 or less required energy. So I would say that it is always better to play more proactive cards such as the Neon, since it allows your opponent to be in a bit more of a tricky situation instead of playing the Marion, which is a raid target, but we don't want to be on the defensive side if we have the option. And our next deck is the yellow exotic deck. So note that this deck is not particularly strong, but you can make this deck out of no SRs, so effectively you can build this deck with just bulk cards. And we'll be looking at the important cards of the deck, which is the 4 cost 1 action point Uni that says Raid. When played, you may switch one active character on your front line to resting. If you do, draw a card and reduce the BP of all characters with 1000 or more BP on your opponent's front line by 500 until the end of the turn. Also activate main if on the front line. Once per turn, choose 1 character on both your front line and energy line and swap them. So as you can see already, one of the goals of the Uni is to rest one of your characters to gain additional effects, and we will be looking at cards that synergize with this ability. This would be in fact the 4 cost 1 AP Jackal that says activate main once per turn. You can only activate this ability if this active character on your front line has been switched to resting by one of your abilities this turn. Switch this character to active. So effectively this ability allows it to resist 1 instance of being rested. And we also have our 3 cost 2 action point Viper that says when played, if on the energy line, play up to 1 exotic or wardress affinity card with 3500 or less BP and 1 AP cost from your hand set to active onto your field. So good in rushing cards onto your field. Also activate main, switch to resting once per turn, switch 1 active character on your front line to resting. If you do choose one character on your field, it gains damage +1 until the end of the turn, and all characters with 1000 or more BP on your opponent's front line lose 500 until the end of the turn. So damage +1 means that if your character doesn't have any buffs, it inherently has damage 1, so +1 will give it damage 2, and if it already has damage 2, it can go up to damage 3. So again, Viper really synergizes well with cards that can resist rest, like the previous Jackal card. And now we will be briefly looking at cards that also fulfill the synergy of resting your cards. So we have our 0 cost Viper, our 1 cost Jackal, and our 2 cost Crow. So all these characters synergize well with resting your own characters on your own field. And funny enough, the special of the deck, the 3 cost 1 AP, the weak and the strong, synergize well with this idea because it says switch up to 1 character on your opponent's front line and switch it to resting. It will remain set to resting the next time it would be switched to active. If you have 3 or more exotic affinity cards on your field, choose up to 1 character on your field and switch it to active. And now we have our first purple deck, which is the purple no trigger deck. So the main theme of this deck is actually you want to play as many non-trigger ability cards as feasible, since you have abilities that synergize with that. And we'll be looking at the main cards for this deck, which is the 5 cost 1 AP Dorothy. That is a raid card that says when played, if you have 4 or more cards without trigger abilities on your field, choose up to 1 character on your opponent's front line with BP equal to or less than 1000 multiplied by the number of cards with trigger abilities on your opponent's field and sideline it. So this card is very strong because it is a great removal option. So that means that if your opponent has 4 cards with trigger abilities on their field, you can effectively sideline a 4000 BP character either when raided on your turn or your opponent's turn. And we have our next card, which is the 4 cost 1 AP Haran. That says raid, if you have 4 more cards without trigger abilities on your field, this character gains impact 1. Also, when attacking, look at the top 2 cards of your deck. Reveal up to 1 card without a trigger ability among them and add it to your hand. Place the remaining cards on the top of your deck in any order. So effectively every turn when attacking, you can draw up to 1 card if you have built your deck with enough non-trigger ability cards. So effectively how many are we playing? We are playing 30 non-trigger cards. So effectively every card that is not a special, final, raid, or color trigger. And speaking of color trigger, we will be playing the 4 cost 1 action point Dorothy. So this card is very core to our strategy because it says during your opponent's turn, if on the front line, when a card without a trigger ability is placed from your life area into your sideline, draw a card. You can only activate this Dorothy ability 1 time each turn. So this is a hard once per turn, no matter how many Dorothys you have on your field. So this card basically turns any non-trigger that you hit during your opponent's turn into a draw trigger. And then we also have our 6 cost 1 AP Eden. That says if you have 3 or more other characters without trigger abilities on your field, reduce this card's required energy by 3 while in your hand, so it goes down to 3, and this card generates 2 energy by itself. Also during your opponent's turn, when a card without a trigger ability is placed from your life area into your sideline, you may switch this active site to resting. If you do add the card that was placed into your sideline to your hand, you can only activate this Eden ability 1 time each turn. So this ability is also a hard once per turn, no matter how many copies of this card you have on your field. And this basically turns every non-trigger that you hit on your opponent's turn into a get trigger. And then for our next deck, which is in the purple color, we have a purple no hand deck or discard deck. And we'll be looking at the main cards for this deck. So one of the strongest cards of the deck is the 5 cost 2 AP Scarlet. That is a non-raid card that says play this character set to active onto your field. Activate main once per turn. Place up to 3 cards from your hand into your sideline. This character gains all abilities listed below until the end of the turn if you have placed the required number of cards into your sideline with this ability. 1 or more, when attacking, draw up to 1 card. 2 or more, this character gains 1000 BP. 3, double attack. So effectively, if you have discarded 3 cards, you gain all of the abilities, turning this into a 5000 BP character that double attacks. And with each attack, you draw up to 1 card, so you will likely draw 2 cards on the turn this attacks. And our next card is the 4 cost 1 AP Snow White. That is also a non-raid card. This card says activate main if on the front line. Place 2 cards from your hand into your sideline. Once per turn, choose 1 character on your opponent's field. It loses all base abilities until the start of your next turn. So what are base abilities? They are basically the text printed on the card itself. So this will not include any buffs that the card has from any other cards. Also when attacking, if you have 2 or less cards in your hand, draw up to 1 card. So this card is very good since it will knock out any when sideline abilities on your opponent's cards or any other abilities such as one blocking or double block. And also this card is key in refueling your hand when you don't have many cards in your hand. And then our next card is the 1 cost 1 AP Rapunzel. That is a cheeky little card because this card works very well in our discard heavy deck, since this card says when this card is placed from your hand into your sideline, if you have a purple card on your field and 2 or less remaining cards in your hand, choose up to one Pioneer affinity card on your field and switch it to active. So this works pretty well with our Snow White card, since that card is a non-raid card, so it will likely come in rested the turn it is played. And if you can discard the Rapunzel with it, it will be able to turn the Snow White active. And now we have our 4-cost 1 AP Modernia that has 4000 BP and is a raid card that says, when played, you may choose up to one character on your opponent's front line. If you do, reduce the chosen character's BP by 3000 until the end of the turn and place all the cards in your hand into your sideline. So this card is great in knocking out an opposing card if it has 3000 or less BP, but the big downside is that you have to discard all cards from your hand. So just keep in mind that this card will likely be the last card you play before your combat phase. And this card works of course pretty well with the smaller version, which is the 2-cost 1 AP Modernia, that says when played, choose up to one character on your opponent's front line. It loses 1000 BP until the end of the turn. So these cards together will effectively allow you to sideline an opposing 4000 BP character. And we also have our 3-cost 1 AP Scarlet that says when attacking, choose up to one character on your opponent's front line. It loses 1000 BP until the end of the turn. Place one card from your hand into your sideline. Even if you weren't able to use your smaller Modernia to do that initial 1000 BP reduction, if you have Scarlet on the field during your battle phase, you can knock out that final 1000 BP on a card that you minused with the 4-cost Modernia. And note that the place one card from your hand into your sideline is mandatory, so even if you have not chosen a card to BP reduce, you always have to discard a card when you attack with Scarlet. But that's not necessarily so bad, because if you have 2 or less cards in your hand during your turn, this character goes up to 4000 BP. And now we have our 5-cost 1 action point Rapunzel with 4000 BP that says when played, add up to one character other than Rapunzel from your sideline to your hand. So this effect is great in recycling cards that we have discarded during the game. Also when attacking, if you have no cards in your hand, choose up to one character with 2000 or less BP on your opponent's front line and switch it to resting. So this is great in resting chump blockers to be able to force your opponent to block with a bigger card, or to push through for extra damage when they have less blockers than attackers. And then we'll be looking at the first green deck, which is the green Missilis deck, and be looking at the key cards of the deck. And for our first card, we have the 5-cost 1 AP Laplace. That is a raid card that says if you have 2 or more other Missilis affinity cards with 4000 or more BP on your front line, this character gains damage too. So you can already see that one of the goals of the deck is to spam 4000 BP cards on your front line. Also when played, choose up to one character on your opponent's front line and move it to their energy line. So very much like the red Kenshin abilities, if your opponent's back line is full, they get to choose one card to remove before they push one card back. And next we'll be looking at the 4000 BP characters that work very well with Laplace, such as the 4-cost 2 AP Maxwell. That says when played, choose up to one other character on your field. It gains 3000 BP until the end of the turn. Then if you have 2 or more other Missilis affinity cards with 4000 or more BP on your front line, switch this character to active. So note that you only really need one other card with 4000 BP at the start, because you can just pump a smaller card. So then after, you would have 2 cards with at least 4000 BP to be able to turn this card active. And then we have our 4-cost 1 AP Drake. So pretty good in stacking your deck to be able to get to the threats that you need. And then we have our color trigger, which is the 2-cost 1 AP Leader, so a basic search effect. But most importantly, this card allows you to pump your cards on your front line to get to that 4000 threshold, because it says activate main, switch to resting, choose one other character on your field. It gains 1000 BP until the end of the turn. So this effectively allows you to bump up your 3000 BP cards, and we're looking at those next. So we have our 3-cost 1 AP Guilty that has 3000 BP. It says during your turn, if you have another affinity card with 4000 or more BP on your front line, this character gains 1000 BP, so bumping it up to 4000. And we also have our 3-cost 1 action point Juliet that says when this character attacks and is not blocked, draw a card. So a very strong effect if you are able to bump this card up to 4000 BP. And then our last deck is the green deck, which is the green Tetra deck, and we'll be looking at the key cards for the deck. Our first card is the 4-cost 1 AP Alice. That is a raid card that says, when played, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. Play up to one green character with 2 or less required energy, and 1 AP cost among them set to resting onto your field. Place the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. After looking at the cards, you may place a combined total of 2 face-down cards under characters on your field into your sideline. If you do, 3 or less required energy instead. So we will break this effect down. So basically, when you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, if you have 2 face-down cards already under characters on your field, you can place those cards into the sideline. So then Alice would be able to spam out a 3-cost card instead of a 2-cost card. And as you can already probably guess, the goal of this deck is to place cards face down underneath your cards to be able to pick up bonus effects. And also this deck will try to spam out as many 3-cost cards as possible. And one of those 3-cost cards is the 3-cost 1 AP Ludmilla that has Step, but also says when played, draw a card, then place one card from your hand face down under a Tetra line affinity card on your field. And this card is the color trigger of the deck, generating 2 energy with 3000 BP. And then for our next 3 energy card, we have the 3 cost 1 AP Alice that says if this character has a face down card under it, it gains impact 1, and this card has 3500 BP. So basically you want to use other cards to be able to put a card face down underneath this card. And then we have our 3 cost 1 AP Noir that says activate main if on the front line once per turn, place one face down card under this character into your sideline. If you do, choose up to 2 characters on your field, they gain 500 BP until the end of the turn. If Blanc is on your field, all characters on your field gain 500 BP until the end of the turn instead. So the goal of this card is to effectively bump all your cards into that 4000 BP threshold to be able to become real threats. And then we have a 3 cost 1 action point Rupee that says when attacking you may place a combined total of 2 face down cards under characters on your field into your sideline. If you do, choose up to 1 Tetra line affinity card on your field played this turn other than Rupee and switch it to active. So the goal of this card is to allow you to double attack with a character that has already attacked, or to attack with a card that you have just played this turn since it would come in rested. So as you can already see, the main goal of this deck is to spam out 3 cost cards and to be able to pump them up to that 4000 BP threshold to become real threats, and you can also double attack with the Rupee. And now we'll be looking at the support cards, which is the 2 cost 1 AP Blanc that says when played, if on the energy line, if Noir is on your field, switch this character to active. Activate main, switch to resting, choose one other Tetra line affinity card on your field, give it 500 BP until the end of the turn, and place the top card of your deck face down under it. So this card pretty much does what this deck is looking for, to pump up our cards and to also place cards face down. And then we also have our 0 cost 1 AP Dala, and this card effectively has the same ability as Blanc, but just on a when played. And now we have our special of the deck, which is our 3 cost 1 AP Alice and the Snow Queen. So this special is a little bit particular since it does not sideline an opposing card. It says choose one of the abilities listed below. If Alice is on your field, all instead. Choose up to 1 affinity card on your field, it gains 2000 BP and impact 1 until the end of the turn. Also, or choose up to 1 Tetra line affinity card on your field. If you do, draw a card, then place 1 card from your hand face down under the chosen card. Then place 1 card from your hand face down under the chosen character and switch it to active. Alright, thanks for watching, and like and subscribe for more videos.